Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. It is your favorite warlock here, practicing necromancer. Tonight, I wanted to give you tips that will help those of you who want to further your magical careers, seeking more spiritual contact in your chosen practice, or even religion for that matter. So let's begin. A lot of times when you get into necromantic practices and rites, you automatically go to things like Eliphas Levi, maybe even Santa Morte, or working with spirits of paganism, that revolve around death. But very few that actually hear the calling to being an agent of death. Seek out a wide range of knowledge. I'm talking things on, say, for an example, that of death urns or spirit jars. The notarizing of, say, for an example, someone's death. This is called necrology. Getting into things like thanatology, anthropology. Things that would benefit you in the long run when dealing with the dead. Hell, even if you're working with demonic entities such as Bifron, Seer, or even Murmur, three well-known entities from the Goetia alone that can teach you on a wide range of necromantic rites and how to commune with the spirits. But if you're going to get into this, why not get into the medical field? Okay. For an example, just out of an example, there's a number of different jobs that will allow you to gain entrance into the death essence. Those of you who are into hermetics, for an example, you may want to get into the Klapoth. I'm talking the tree of Da'ath, the tree of death, also known as Da'ath essences. Okay, that's D A apostrophe A T H. For those of you who do not know. Now, what's interesting here is that once you get into this type of career, you might want to apply for a position as an apprentice in a mortuary, maybe even a funeral home. Go to work within, say, for an example, a long term residential facility, a nursing home, maybe assisted living, because this way you can become a CNA. You can work in the kitchen as a dietary aid. You get to be around the sick and dying, and you get a really good, strong sense of that death essence. You may even want to get into things like the Egyptian Book of the Dead, get into the priesthoods, such as the Shem priesthood, get into the Knights of Templar or the Hashishin, get into, say, for an example, let's go with the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Bars Ordo, okay? Or Thordol, rather, I should say. These are things that will benefit you. I mean, even if you get into anthropology, you really are studying the past. I mean, you're dealing with the how should I say this? You're dealing with bones, you're dealing with you're dealing with things that would allow you to go into the past genealogy-wise that will help you find the ethnic backgrounds of somebody, the origins of their family tree, you know, to discern if they are male or female. How long have they been dead? Even if you get into anthropology, for an example, this is a form of archaeology. This allows you to learn a huge amount of the origins and genealogy of an individual. Getting into linguistics, you can look at their background, what languages they spoke. I mean, the geno alone teaches you so much about an individual. Get into anthropology within the form of, say, sociology. Sociology allows you to understand how people deal with certain situations. For an example, right now, the two most sensitive things that you are not supposed to quote and unquote discuss within any form or fashion happens to be religion and or sexual preference. Okay. And it's interesting because even if you tell a joke, okay, somebody's going to end up getting butthurt and create a riot. Okay. So when we get into sociology, we're not just learning about how these individuals associate from a third party perspective, but you're actually looking at how they're handling things. It would be like studying thanatology in this fashion because you're dealing with the individual who's afflicted by the fact that they're going to die. They're sick, they're dying, they're withering away. What does that play within a psychological perspective upon the mind? Okay. How does it make you feel? You know what I'm saying? Because you're not just dealing with the individual who's going through this. No, you're dealing with also their family. You're dealing with their impact upon a community. Okay. So sociology within anthropology plays a huge part in this. And then you have the death. Okay. Anthropology in itself, because you can determine, has the bones been buried? How long have they been dead? How long have they've been around? There's so many different aspects in this that speaks to you and allows you to learn about how they've lived their life, how they died, you know? And it's interesting because, just out of an example, I forget the name of the show, but it was one of those biography type things. It was like a TV series. And if you look at crimes of religion, for an example, there was a woman originally from Cuba. She was into Palo Mayombe, okay? And she fled Palo Mayombe to go to Florida, and then from Florida up to, I think it was like Colorado or someplace up that way, you know? And she basically used her clientele to gain access to graveyards, basically bones, skeletons. And what's intriguing here is the fact that she got these people to commit misdemeanors on behalf of her because she was too much of a fucking coward to go out and do it herself. But because it was the individuals who needed her help, who were hiring her for her specialities, I guess you can say, her expertise, she would make powders and remedies out of the bones. She would use the bones themselves within rituals and rites, and in a lot of and sometimes would even make the those who hired her ill, sick because of the ingestion. Ingesting the bones and the marrow of the bones. But at the same time, you look at the actual effects of her rites and rituals. The police, or in this case the FBI, brought up the question within the article, I should say, is is she a fake or is she the real deal? All we know is what this one video, this one episode talked about. And it was from a criminologist perspective. And this is brought into the play of number one, was it a natural death or was it homicide? Number two, was it an accident? Number three, natural causes. And there was one more. Okay. And I'm not going to get into that aspect here. But you see where anthropology plays into a huge part in what necromancers do. Okay. We commune with the dead. We practice death magic. I'm talking wrathful and baneful sorcery. I'm talking about spiritual conjuration and spiritual reanimation of spirits. Divination, even, where we can work with the dead and go into the dead through astral projection. But thanatology, on the other hand, that is something completely different. A thanatologist doesn't just have a degree in psychology, but they also have degrees that are similar to those in hospice or that of a CNA. Okay. This is where you're constantly dealing with how should I say, the terminally ill, the elderly. You're literally studying death. And when I say studying death, I'm talking the viewpoints of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, or what is now known as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, because of the fact that the degrees of decay, the degrees of wasting away to the point where you're dealing with the emotions, the denial. You're dealing with the fact that the individual is coming to terms with the fact that they're going to die. You're looking at the family and counseling them and looking at them going, kind of guiding them through the process of death, preparing them for, hey, when this happens, this is what you got to have in your backyard, so to speak. But then you've also got the fact that the studying of what occurs during death and after death. I can tell you firsthand that I've heard the stories of RAs who have been around somebody who is dying. Hell, I've experienced firsthand where I've had to do CPR and control a situation where somebody was freaking out because they didn't know what to do. They were that affected by this person dying. And then it goes into even further because you're dealing with the experiments that have been taking place over the last 3 to 400 years within the medical community just to get the technology and the herbalism that we have today within synthetic medications that specifically target certain things. For an example, stimulants, that of, say, pain relievers, the defibrillator, okay, a form of technology. Where do you suppose all this came from? Look at the experiments and the belief of ice water in psychiatric hospitals, okay? Today, you got more refined tools of the trade. Side of the head, bite down on the bite guard, and light them up, so to speak, okay? Another form of necromancy because in this case, thanatology is dealing with the mentally ill. You're dealing with those who have committed suicide or tried to commit suicide. Welcome to Psychology 101, so to speak. But what about the tools of the trade? What about the methods of performing these practices? Have you ever wondered about geomancy? I'm talking geometric shapes and within this field. A lot of times you'll be able to have a much stronger in-depth reaction when dealing with spirits when you're working out of a graveyard, perhaps an abandoned church or place of worship. You know, go into a natural source like the woods, hit the trails, you know, draw or how should I say, use a stick and actually create a four-way, okay, intersection, the crossroads. What's interesting is get to know the spirits and call them forth, like Anubis, or that of, say, Hell, Hel, okay? But remember that when you do this, you want to have symbols of death, maybe a scepter made of bones, maybe, say, for an example, mala beans. I'd recommend jade to you or sandalwood. They got a strong connection with death and spirits. You may want to work with bones such as the skull, a femur, you know, maybe even vertebrae, depending on the types of rituals that you're doing. But if you're doing, invocations or evocations, I would recommend a inverted triangle. I've had nothing but good luck in that area. And when you work with a inverted triangle, and you have powders like, say, brimstone, for an example, with, say, some form of crystallized salt. Bath salts, for an example, come in crystallized, either black and white or just plain white. Some are even pink. Okay, depending on where you go. I mean, if you go into, say, Bed and Body Wash, or I don't know if you have that where you are, but up at the mall where I am, they actually have that. My better half actually enjoys that store. You can go into Bed Bath and Beyond, same thing. You can get bath salts and everything there. You can go to like Ocean Lot, Job Lot. You know, they have a whole bunch. Go into your grocery aisle. Go into the salts. Bath. The regular sea salts, for an example. Sea salt, kosher sea salt, or even Great Value. You know, great stuff. Mix it in with the brimstone powder. Okay, connect them with three candles, two black and one red. Place a black scrying mirror in the center of this. Maybe a effigy, like a photo of the person or former spirit, say for a reincarnated spirit that you are trying to contact. Or if you're going for a demon, you know, place place that seal or that photo of that being in the center. Okay. Some people have even been known to place those seals between the stand and the black scrying mirror. If you think this is a great way to invoke them, because it's you want to think of it as a conduit, okay? But at the same time, you want to think of it as a conductor. You want to channel that energy. You want to bring it forth, and to do that, you need the ingredients to bring forth an electrical charge. Some people, who like to live off the grid will utilize batteries, car batteries. If you're indoors, look at magnets. Same exact thing. Amazing. But look at the essences of death. Some people wear clothing of the dead. I have a sports jacket, which is literally on that chair right over there, that belonged to a man that passed away of cancer. Kid you not, it was a rare form of cancer that back in the 90s, he had a huge chunk of his large intestine removed. 10 years later, he passed away of cancer. And what's interesting is I ended up with this jacket. Okay. And I can tell you that it is a very good thing because it helps you connect to the death essence. If you go to a cemetery, I recommend that you work with the main elder body of the spirits. Okay, don't use candle flames if you're going to a cemetery. Never do that. Okay, trust me. I tried for a couple of years when I became a necromancer, and I always went there. I channeled. I set up the candle flames. If you go back into my YouTube channel, you'll see the results of those. Okay. There was no spiritual connection. I mean, yeah, there was a huge amount of peace there, but there wasn't really a spiritual presence. It wasn't until I sat there at these crossroads and invoked the spirits, called them forth, clearly stated my intent between the male and female ley lines, male being 4, female being 3. Okay? Doing this in darkness, then you begin to understand because of the fact that the spirits will get your attention. Not joking in this manner. Okay? Number one, you'll see flashes of light. Number two, you'll see apparitions. Number three, you may find yourself in a very unpleasant state of mind because when everything just suddenly dies down, I'm talking deafening silence. It's like you get that sense that you're being watched. Could be an animal, could be the spirits. Because you got to remember that you have wanderers, you have spirits that are considered to be undead, and then you have the dead themselves. This is all done in a cemetery, by the way. But if you're in your own personal inner sanctum, your own personal inner sanctum, then I would recommend the triangle of evocation, the inverted triangle, with the brimstone powder and the bath salts and the 3 candles, connecting them. Okay, these things work. Okay, if you don't believe me, I recommend that you experiment with them. Hands down, just experiment. But these are some tips that will help you benefit, especially if you want to get into necromancy, Nikia, even. Get into the Grimwork systems and you'll find how these spirits will guide you in many, many different ways. They'll place titles, okay? They will place, say for example, Belial, the giver of titles of importance, senatorships. Look at me for an example. I started this journey back in 2011 as a deacon, an ordained deacon. 2013, an ordained priest. And now, as of 2022, August 4th, an archbishop. You see, these are what I mean. They will bestow titles. They will open the doors for you to walk through. They will guide you to your path. They'll teach you how to commune with spirits, how to summon them, how to learn from them and what they can teach you. But you got to be open. You got to be open to this stuff. You got to have faith and belief in them. So when I tell you that there are tips and that you are going to have to experiment for you, because the one thing I've learned is that what works for me doesn't always work for someone else. I found it best to guide those that come to me and want to learn from me to apply it to their lives within their own unique way. If a spirit wants to work with you, they'll let you know. When I was studying necromancy, I went through various different traditions, starting from the Shem priesthood in Egypt to the Hashishin of the Middle East, and finally into Slavic witchcraft. Okay? Before being contacted by Papa Gedi of the Gedi family of Loa, which brought me right back into Haitian Voodoo, which I had a small foothold into that religion years ago when I first got interested in it. And then it took me back into Santeria and Pedro Mayambi, took me into Pedro Monte, and then finally back into Santa Morte and you got it, Brujeria. Okay? These spirits have led me worldwide, and I am still learning. Currently, Asian black magic, sorcery. I'm talking Malaysia, Indonesia, Chinese, Japanese black magic. These practices are not for the faint of heart. If you're not called or feel a connection to this practice, then you most likely are not meant to be a necromancer. But it is up to you to grow, to experiment, and to mature within your traditions. It is up to you. Have a good night, and until next time.